I'm incredibly excited to be in Stockholm. This has been wonderful. It's been such an amazing, welcoming experience, so I'm very humbly honored. Thank you very much for having me. I'm from the US, from a place called New Jersey, which means I talk fast and there's a lot of content. So here's how I turn that bug into a feature. At the way end of this, I'm going to put a link on the screen, and you get to download my entire talk. And it's got all of my notes, which is a lot more. This talk is about 10 pages, so you get all that, and it's all yours. Just because there's going to be a lot of information, and today has been a lot too. I know it's right before coffee, which is usually the talking spot that I dread because everybody's a little tired, but I think we're in a good spot. So today has been great, because we've been talking a lot about what is going on in the state of design. So this talk is going to be very practical and tactical, and it's going to be about, great, okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on in design, like what do we do with it now, okay? All right, so I'm going to talk about 3 things in the next 20 or so minutes. I'm going to talk about successful leadership, the technical skills that you as a leader or your team would kind of come into, and how to be better at the work that you do. I'm also going to talk about some behavioral challenges that come up and some things to avoid. Second bucket I'm going to talk about is the business value of design. We had a lot of chats about this earlier. I'm going to share one of the frameworks that I use most often. There's a bunch of them, but this is the one I go to a lot, and it's applicable for at the smaller project level, but it's also at the big, like, here's how the design function adds value to the business. And the last part is something that we don't talk a lot about as designers, about navigating politics. You know, it's the hard part of our job. And, you know, half of our job is like doing good work, and the other half is really like getting it through complex ecosystems and companies. Like, that's what they are. They're these organic living things that you have to get through. So we're going to talk about those things. Everybody okay with that? All right, good, fantastic. All right, so, no, just kidding. All right. So there's been a lot of talk about what makes a successful leader. So the first thing I want to ask you is, like, well, what do you think that is? You don't have to raise your hands yet, but just like think about, okay, what's the technical skill or what's the quality that makes someone really good at their job? A lot of people say trust, a lot of people say craft. It's a lot of different things. So in decades of management literature and internet scholarship, it kind of comes down to these 4 buckets. One is managing people, the other is managing processes, then it's influence and relationships, and then driving business. Okay. So managing people, that's team building. Are you a leader who can get the right people together to solve a problem? Then there's developing talent. That's coaching, that's mentoring, that's advising, and not just your team, but other parts of the business. There's managing diversity. We all in this room know when you have diverse and inclusive teams, the creative work is just better. And then there's crisis leadership. Last 2 years have been a testament to that. Like, how are you when there are real big problems? How are you as a leader? How does your team show up when there are problems? Then there's conflict management. How do you resolve the issues that happen? Then there is your managing processes, your project management. Are you on time and under budget? Then there's problem solving, and that's like the real problems versus the cosmetic ones. And that's also solving problems on an individual level and at scale, like a global level. Customer focused, that's anticipating needs, responding to demands, and continuous service improvements. UX leaders usually index pretty high on this one. Then we have relationships. So that's your interpersonal skills. Like, are you someone tactful, someone people can talk to? Then relationship building. Like, how are you at building those relationships cross-functionally outside of your team? Persuasion, very much a hard part of our job. Like, how do you get people to do things that they may not want to do? Your negotiation, how do you work with other people to negotiate good things? Consensus building, especially if you're part of a digital company or a lot of the highly mature design organizations. It's really a lot about like building consensus with a lot of disparate groups and bringing them together. Then there's communication. Is it clear? Is it focused? Is it empowering? Is it inspiring? Okay. The last bucket is innovation. That's your change leadership. That's your identifying improvements. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. Visionary leadership as a skill. And that is long-term POV building, like building those point of views and having like the shared vision of what that is. Business acumen, that's your business fundamentals, like managing a P&L and like financial modeling. I personally suck at financial modeling, so I will never be successful at that. But it's something important to know. Then there's always learning. It's commonly referred to as growth mindset. And then there's strategic thinking. Now, I've gotten this question a bit since I've been here. So when we talk about strategy, we are talking about long-term competitive differentiation, delivering against business objectives, and playbooks on how to do it. You can't just be on an island and develop these things. You actually need to be able to get a lot of people together to deliver against those things. Okay? So 19 skills that can make you successful. It's also a really good photo slide for those of you who are so inclined. Oh, there are cameras. I feel like Beyonce all of a sudden. This is great. All right, cool. So let's have a legitimate question. How many of these, let me go forward. So how many of these do you think you need to be successful? I'll throw the list up there in a second. Okay? So if you're going to be a successful leader, how many of these 19 things do you think they are? So quick show of hands. How many people think 5 to 10? Okay. Well, okay. How many people think 11 to 15? Say some hands, raise them high. It's very bright up here. Okay, cool. So how many people think 16 to 19? Okay, so you 16 to 19 people, you self-identify as high performers, just in case you want to know that, so that's good. The reality of it, based on all the research and what I've seen in the last 2 decades, you only need to be good at 3 of these, and your success as a leader improves 50%. So when you think about how you show up as a leader, like how your team shows up, by focusing just on 3 things, you just get a lot better. Anybody want to take a guess what the improvement is for 14 to 19? It's actually minimal. You know, the challenge that happens is that teams, they try to be all things to all people in the company. They want to do the strategy, they want to do the problem solving, they want to do the vision. And when you try to be good at all of these things, you end up being great at nothing. And this is also a really quick way to get burnt out. Now, one of the things I'd like you to take back between now and when you go to work is that how does your team show up? Like really think about those skills and what objectively your team does and how they present themselves to the rest of the org. You know, by focusing on just a couple things, your success as a leader and your team in general just improves greatly. Okay, so we talked about some things to do. Let's talk about some things not to do. So digging into a lot of behavioral psychology and research, I'm not going to bore you with that too. There are some behavior that will derail you on being successful as a leader and as your team. Now, as a cautionary tale, 60% of new leaders do at least one of these things. So, emotionally unintelligent. That is micromanaging, reacting negatively to criticism. That's manipulative, quick to dismiss, failure to acknowledge the accomplishments of others, intimidating. That's what emotionally unintelligent is. And whenever I do this talk, I know I can see right now, some people are picturing people you work with. That's okay, that's normal. Second thing is lack of critical thinking. That's too much on the details, jumping to conclusions, easily influenced, or not sharing relevant information. And the last one is this kind of lack of accountability. It's abdication of ownership. So when people say, yeah, it's not my problem, that's another team's problem. Or it's being not aligned to the values of the organization. So just being aware of these things really help you kind of sidestep those traps, how you and your team show up. Now, anybody want to take a quick guess on what the most egregious one is? The one where your success or your team drops by like 32%? It's failure to recognize the accomplishments of others. It's a simple thing and it's easily fixable. But when you do that, when you fail to acknowledge the people who have helped do great design work or put the stuff together, it ends up being pretty bad for you. I've actually seen a lot of people managed out of organizations because of that. All right. Now, I know I'm going to get this question at some point during the day. It's which is the one skill that makes you the best leader? What's the one thing that makes the team fantastic? There is no answer. There's no golden snitch. There's no silver bullet. But you know your teams better than I do. So what is the thing that resonated with you the most? And what's one thing that you can try and fix between now and when you go back to work? Something to think about, something to take a note of. Now, anecdotally, the many teams that I've worked with, if your UX maturity, if like the team itself is just kind of starting out, focus on the problem solving. It's a really great place to be. If your UX is a little bit more seasoned and doing other work, The strategic thinking is the thing that I've seen teams really elevate with. And when your UX practice is really embedded into the organization, then it's that business acumen. It's where there's a direct connection between design and the business value. Now, from a behavioral perspective, you'll see that trust, psychological safety, that's consistent with all of them. Like, that's the thing. That's the thing you need to focus on. But it's scope of trust. So if you're just kind of starting out with your team, focus on like just building trust within the people that you are working with directly. When it's a little bit more seasoned, it's about trust with your peers outside of the team or in the business units. And if you are really embedded into it, it's about building trust with your customers. You can do it other ways, but like you could focus on customers first. It just takes a lot longer to get there, but it's something to be aware of. Now, the too long don't read on this one is develop the right skills at the right time that are right for you. Okay? Now, let's jump into demonstrating the business value of design. Now, there's a bunch of different frameworks that I mentioned. This is the one I go to a lot. So if you take anything away from this section, remember this equation. X by Y equals Z. Now, whether it's you're writing your resume or you're presenting to leadership, I use this thing all the time. And I blatantly stole it from the senior vice president of HR at Google. This guy's named Laszlo Bock, super smart. So what this means is we accomplished X by doing Y, and the result was Z. Often, all the time, when I'm working with design teams, they're like, hey, we developed a design system, which everyone in this room knows how hard those things are and the value they provide, but that's all, we developed a design system. I'm like, that's great. Doesn't really tell me anything. What's better is we improve the bottom line for the company and we increased efficiency by developing a design system that gave us cost savings of €1 million, and the employee productivity is increased by 22%. Do you see how the first thing is more like a to-do list, and when you use this equation, when you just plug in that information, it gives value, and it also gives a frame of reference. So it's just a very simple twist of reframing how you show up, how design shows up in the conversations. Now, whenever you can, speak to the metrics that matter. Product dimensions, range of responsibilities, redundancies that were reduced, friction, design debt, tech debt, those are two different things. Revenue gains, all of those things, super easy to pull out when you're having these conversations. If your organization is really big on customer experience, you're talking about net promoter score, you're talking about customer satisfaction, acquisition rate, churn, retention, sentiment, and customer lifetime value, that's a big one. Okay? Now, if you are dealing with a financial individual, you're going to be talking about earnings, investment, return on investment, margins. All of those things ladder into the P&L. That's your profit and loss statement. Every single business unit, every single company has one of those. Debt to asset ratio or monthly recurring revenue. If it's an app or if it's a software as a service, you're going to be really focused on that number. Now, in most organizations, design usually ladders into a marketing function or a product function. If it's marketing, you're using the metrics of growth, qualified leads, site traffic, time on site bounce rate, click-throughs, cost of customer acquisitions. A lot of stuff in there. Now, if it's product focus, you're talking about the customer effort score, the net value score, adoption rate, users retention, system usability scale that's sometimes referred to as SUS, bug resolution, usability, percentile ranking, that's sometimes called SPR-Q, time on task perception, task success. Now, I know it's a lot of information. It's in the notes. You will all get this afterwards. The great thing about that equation and the 40+ metrics I gave you is that every single one of them is affected by design. Every one. Now, you have the equation and the metrics. And it's good for you to have. When I am presenting to a C-suite, CEO, I don't mention any of those things. It ends up being like this record scratch moment, and they're like, uh-oh. The purpose of design is to drive the company forward. So it's very important to use the language of business. So one of the notes that you should be taking is, what are the things that my company or my client, what does the entire company care about? Okay? So when I have those conversations with the CEOs, here are the 6 things I talk about. I talk about increasing efficiencies. How does the design system make the entire business more efficient? Talk about cost reduction. How does a component library reduce engineering costs? I talk about mitigating risk. How does making our site accessible reduce risk of getting sued or possible legal action? How does making more informed decisions, like this building a metric library, how does that help us understand our customers better? Improving an experience. How does reducing bugs just make users happier? And adding value to people's lives. How does a service blueprint actually make customers feel safe? All of the work you do as a designer should ladder into one of these 6 things. Now, just so you know as a frame of reference, the more senior you are as a design leader, the more you have to address every single one of these. Now, we talked about the successful behavior qualities. We've talked about the equation. Let's talk about navigating great work through a complex ecosystem. Let's talk about the politics. So this was actually the first thing I learned at Harvard Business School. It was codified by this guy named Dr. Stephen Cohen. He calls it the WIFIT, the what's in it for them. Now, we've talked a little bit about this today. Successful influence always starts with the other person. It starts there and it ends there. So whenever you're talking about the design, how is this aligned to what their goals are? How is this important to them? Most designers are really shocked that the bulk of my schedule is just spent talking to other people in the company, talking to clients. But while I'm talking to them, I'm getting to understand their problems, their pain points, what their goals and objectives are, how they're delivering to other parts of it. And while they're talking, the only thing I'm doing is thinking about how these design solutions are addressing their problems. Another tactic I use a lot, it's called pre-wiring. Whether you're presenting to your direct boss or a board of directors, nothing should ever come as a surprise. This is like pre-wiring is kind of like the meeting before the meeting. It's where you individually take a key stakeholder through all of the materials in private. Now, this works for a couple different reasons. There's basic behavioral psychology that people who are involved with something will end up supporting it. Another thing is they're gonna add value. Like in some way, shape, or form, they're gonna make the product or the work better. Now, if there are any red flags or if there are any problems, you're gonna be addressing them in private. You never wanna have red flags addressed in like a large meeting with people. For those of you who know, that just ends up in disaster. And they're also gonna give you something called air cover. Like a good stakeholder or a good manager or a good executive is gonna know to kind of cover you and help you out just a little bit, or who needs to be influenced. They're gonna help you out in that aspect. So there's 3 little strategies that I use. One is I call the 2-minute drill. So you can walk by someone's desk or grab them for a quick Slack call, and if there's one specific problem that you're working on, be like, hey, what do you think about this? Can you give me some advice? How would you solve this? It's just really quick, something you could deal with very briefly. Another thing is regular updates. This is where your one-on-ones or your staff meetings are critical. You're walking the team through the work and you're building up support for it. And then there's the more formal approach that, a week before or 2 weeks before, you have time booked with that key stakeholder and you're walking them through all of the material, okay? Now, it's critical that whenever you are talking about design, you never talk about design. You don't talk about the aesthetics or how something looks. Now, I know this is the point where I really I lose the audience, but it's okay, I'll come back on that. Here's the thing. If you're a manager or definitely a director, all of your work should be good. Like, you should always be presenting very finely crafted, good quality design solutions. But you're talking about the outcomes of the design. You're talking about the strengths and weaknesses of that particular solution. When you start talking about the output, about how something looks, design is executional. And you end up having just like really long meetings about the shape of buttons, which is just not a good use of anybody's time. Now, as I'm winding down, I want to talk about like 3 reasons why really good design fails. Now, this list isn't exhaustive. It's not definitive. It was really interesting in my time at GE, there were 417 agencies that we worked with, which is just way too many. But when you're talking to your partners, you're working with them, it's like there are a lot of things that just came up. So the first thing why good design fails is that you didn't justify the work. You gotta give context and explain the why. What is the pain point? How is this supporting the business goals? How is this driving the company forward? You need to have answers to those. Have them in the decks, have them in the presentations, have them in the Figma files, whatever it is. Like, you need to have answers to those things to justify the work. Okay? The second problem is you didn't respect the constraints. Now, there's going to be times when like hands are going to be tied, or budgets are going to be cut, resources are going to get allocated, or there's maybe a critical shift in the corporate strategy. It's going to happen. So be flexible. Like, if the budget gets cut, know which part of the project that you're going to kind of get rid of. If you lose resources, have an idea of what the minimal viable product you can make with the people that you have. If priorities shift, know how you can kind of readapt the priorities to fit with the new direction. I know that sounds odd. It happened to me twice at GE, where I had to take this big thing and just shift it to the new corporate direction. But you know what? Because I was able to do that as a leader, I got noticed by the executive team, and it really helped me out. That ability to be flexible and be adaptable. Now, the last reason, selling it internally. And I take a pause here. This one's the big one. This is the one that's most common why good design doesn't see the light of day. And it's also for in-house as well as consultants and agency. This is the thing, that you didn't sell it internally. You didn't sell it to leadership, and you didn't sell it throughout the organization. You know, a lot of my time is spent really kind of addressing this stuff. And I want to express this to you all too, like something to leave on is you gotta be an ambassador of great work. You gotta build those relationships, understand the executives, what their needs are, and you gotta give the stakeholders the tools to just champion the work. You know, no one wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm gonna be a jerk and I'm gonna just say no to all of this design. No one does that. But when you champion the work, and you build those relationships, and you give them the tools to work with the design and see the value of it, your job just gets a lot easier. Thank you very much for your time.
Fabulous, Andy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Join me at my table.
Yeah.
Can I tempt you with some biscotti, perhaps?
So this is stuff that's been here all day under the hot lights?
No.
Okay. No, I'm driving.
Or maybe something like this. This is at least, you know, it's sealed.
Oh, Akibev. Yeah,
You can do that. I'll open it for you.
Fantastic.
We had a chat a few weeks ago on a Zoom call, and one part that I particularly enjoyed, and which was quite challenging. Here's a... No one's used that.
Cheers, everybody. I'll see you at the bar later. It'd be great.
One part I particularly enjoyed was when we kind of went into a coaching section.
Okay.
And I felt, I wish these guys could get some of that.
Okay.
Are you going to be here all night?
Well, we can do it now if you want.
You could do something?
Yeah. How many people are here? 700? Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, okay.
All right,
I'm intrigued.
sorry. First, let's get approval. Everyone okay if we skip this? Instead of doing Q&A, we do coaching? Yeah, okay, cool. I want to be fair, though, just because I know I get a lot of questions. I'm super accessible. You could throw questions at me. I answer every single one that I get. So cool? Okay, let's do coaching.
And I know you will.
Yeah. Okay. I think the first thing you need to do is you need to change here. So if you want inward change, you need outward change. Can you grab a seat in the front row?
Should I go and grab a chair?
Yeah,
okay.
Sit down, front row.
Okay. Fair enough. Oh, this is what it's like.
Okay. Everybody okay? Everybody comfortable? Good. All right, everybody just real quick, just take a big deep breath. Breathe out. Okay. So I want you to think for a second. All right? I want you to think about, go through your life, go through the highlight reel that's been your life, and who are some leaders who helped you become a better person? Just like think real quick on that. Okay? Everybody? All right. Now, I want you to make a list of those people, just their names. You can write them down or you can keep them in their head. Got a list of people? Okay. So look at that list or think about that list. One of those names is going to stand out more than everybody else's. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want you to think about one moment that you had with that person where they helped you become a better person, where they helped you challenge you to be a better individual. Like this could be a parent, this could be a best friend, this could be a sibling, this could be a manager, it could be anybody. You have that moment?
I got it. Yeah, I got one.
Okay. I want you to play that moment in your mind like a movie. What the person looked like, What'd they say to you? What was the language? What was going on? Sometimes people can actually like hear sounds when you do this exercise. Okay, cool. How do you feel right now?
I feel really good.
Okay, what's the emotion?
I feel calm, appreciated.
Appreciated.
Seen.
Seen.
Cared for.
Cared for. This is consistent with anyone else here? Yeah? Assuming yes. Okay, cool. Any other emotions coming up? You could shout them out. Inspired. That one comes up a bit. Any other words? Valued. Valued is good. Valued is good. I'm sorry? Improved. Okay. So this is all resonating with everyone? People are kind of having similar emotions? That's weird. There's 700 people here, and they're all having similar emotions. So this exercise has been done for decades. Various cultures, various walks of life. It's really interesting that they all kind of have those same emotions. So that should signal something to you. Now, I do this exercise for a couple reasons. One, to show that you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are feeling similar emotions in this, so this idea of being inclusive is good. Second thing, what you were doing for the last 3 minutes, you were accessing your parasympathetic nervous system. I'm not going to explain what that is. But what that is your internal brain's, bless you, your internal brain's method for change. You are accessing a good emotion, and you are opening yourself up to make more change as a leader, as an executive, as a person. So those two things right there. Now, when you open yourself up to do more change, that's great. That's really good, and it's really easy to do. What's fantastic about when you access the parasympathetic nervous system is that you're rooting your change in something positive. Anybody ever try to lose weight? Yeah, doesn't always work. You know why? Because it's a negative reason that's inspiring you to lose weight. I go through this all the time. Whereas it's like, I don't like how I look, so I want to lose weight. What happened was the shift is if you root that shift in something positive, like, I want to lose weight because I want to be around longer for my kids. That's when I started losing weight. And that's been proved in a lot of scientific research and weight loss centers around the world. So that second thing is rooting your change, rooting your leadership goals into something positive. That's great. And that's powerful. And do you want to know what something really powerful is?
Hit me.
So when I ask you the next question, the real change happens with this. Whose list do you want to be on? Thank you very much for your time.
That is incredible. I enjoyed that so much. Thank you, Andrew LaMonica.